Pete, in your books, you deal with you deal with confronting this whole idea of a literalistic, biblicistic view of the Bible and undoing that. As this whole shift is happening and growing, more people writing about it, talking about it. Pete, where do you think in the 21st century, where is Christianity, Christian spirituality, where is it going to end up with its Bible?
Darned if I know where it's
Um,
but I do think the trends that I'm sensing, I'm sure all of you are sensing as well, I think will continue. I think people will be more upfront, be willing to be more public and upfront about questions they've had about just the nature of the Bible for a long time. And I think the more people talk, the more other people come out of the woodworks and talk. So I think what we're seeing now, whether it's deconstruction concerning the Bible or progressive, whatever we want to call it, I really don't care. It's more a willingness to re-examine fundamental questions, which are ones near and dear to my heart and to our heart at the Bible for Normal People, namely, what is the Bible really? And then what does it mean to read it well? And I do think that that's going to keep growing.
do you think it's going to have a less than supernatural view? And what I mean is, those of us who used to hold an old literalistic, even though we understood it was written by humankind, sure, we got all of that. It still was something that was supernaturally written by God. That was, for a lot of us, an old understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think for the Bible to stay relevant, where people are really grappling with it, it will have to lessen that kind of supernatural view towards it?
I would put it a little bit differently. Again, this is just my little opinion, but I think, there are different ways of thinking about the nature of inspiration. And, one of those models is something of a dictation that God is actually, write this word and then a comma and then write that preposition, all that kind of stuff. And I think, the more you study the Bible, the harder it is to come away with that kind of a point of view. So where's God in all this? Well, that's the question. How do we talk about God as a part of that? And I'd like to think, if people may have be familiar with the book that got me fired, Inspiration and Incarnation, about 15, 20 years ago. And not fired, I got resigned. That's the official language. But if the incarnation, which don't ask me to define that, that's, to me, that's itself a mystery. But if that God with us, however we define that, whatever it means, if that's part of the Christian faith, then I think we should be up to the task of seeing the full humanity of Scripture and how that can still be used by God, but that would drive us to very different notions of things like authority. Like, how is the Bible authoritative? Well, on the verse level, on the story level, on the theological sort of synthetic level of bringing, on the biblical theological level, those are all great questions that I think people who are trying to follow Jesus and who are so inclined to should be thinking about all the time anyway.
Yeah.
And they're not new questions, they're old questions. They've been answered in different ways. And I think it's our spiritual responsibility to address those questions in our time and in our generation.
So have you landed, or do you have an evolving view of what inspiration of the Bible means?
I sort of, yeah, and it definitely is evolving and changing, and I'm not at all bothered by that. That's just the way it is. And I think, if God is worth anything, God understands our humanity and how we struggle to put the pieces together. But for me, a notion of like God inspiring a text has to be sort of a subcategory of a larger issue, which is, the way it's often put by theologians, the God and world problem. How is God related to the world at all? And throwing in, things that might sound obscure, things I talked about in Curveball, like evolution or cosmology, that all affects how we understand the nature of God's relationship to the world, to the cosmos. And a text is one subset of that.
Mhm.
And that's sort of, that would be the starting point for me to keep thinking about this sort of stuff. So if God is, if the presence of the Spirit is in everything and everyone, which I believe to be true, that's the kind of language I would like to try to bring into discussing the nature of Scripture itself. And that does move us from, let's say, black and white, either or sort of models of authority, you know, listen to it or don't listen to it. No, it's discernment, it's wisdom, really. That's what we're trying to do with the Bible. And so to me, that's generally where I land, and that's probably not the most clear explanation all of you have ever heard. That's
Oh,
that's
no,
me. Welcome to
it,
my brain.
no.